Subscribe to my YouTube channel for more amazing stories. The grand lobby of Reeves International was nothing like she had ever seen before. Shiny marble floors stretching endlessly. A chandelier so massive it looked like it could hold the stars. And people walking around in sharp suits, talking into their phones like every second was worth a fortune. Standing near the entrance in her worn-out sneakers, Lena felt completely out of place. Her jeans had a tear at the knee, not the stylish kind, but because she couldn't afford new ones. She held onto her backpack strap tightly, her heart pounding. She had come here for a reason. Just an hour ago, Lena had been at the grocery store, helping her mom pick out the cheapest vegetables, when she caught sight of a magazine at the checkout counters. The front page showed Alexander Reeves, one of the richest men in the country, standing beside a young girl. The headline screamed, "Billionaire CEO's daughter steals the spotlight at charity gala." But Lena didn't care about the title or the money. She cared about the girl in the picture, because the girl had her face. Same deep brown eyes, same dimple on the left cheek, same exact features, as if Lena was staring at her own reflection. It was impossible. Lena had stared at that image, frozen, her hands trembling. "Lena, what's wrong?" her mom had asked, worried. She couldn't speak. She could barely breathe. There was only one way to get answers, and that's how she ended up here, inside the towering building of Reeves International, waiting for the moment that could change everything. A security guard eyed her suspiciously. "Do you have an appointment, miss?" Lena swallowed hard. No, but I really need to see Mr. Reeves." The guard sighed, already shaking his head. "Mr. Reeves doesn't take walk-ins." Lena opened her mouth, desperate for something to say, when suddenly voices echoed from the hallway. A group of executives stepped out of the elevator, dressed in sleek business attire, and at the center of them, Alexander Reeves walked with the kind of presence that demanded attention. Tall, confident, the kind of man who had never struggled a day in his life. Lena's breath caught in her throat. This was it. Her one chance. Before she could second-guess herself, she stepped forward and misspoke the words that had been haunting her since she saw that magazine. "Hi, sir. Why does your daughter look exactly like me?" The world seemed to stop. Alexander Reeves froze mid-step, his sharp blue eyes snapping toward her. The executives around him exchanged confused glances, their conversation forgotten. Lena's voice shook, but she didn't back down. "I'm serious. Your daughter, Olivia Reeves, she looks just like me, and I need to know why." For a moment, there was nothing but silence, and then Alexander's expression changed. His confidence faltered for just a second. A flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Lena caught it. She wasn't crazy. He knew something. "Who are you?" Alexander's voice was low, careful. Lena straightened her back. "My name is Lena Carter. I'm 17, and I need answers." Alexander took a slow step forward, his gaze studying her, as if he was trying to piece together a puzzle he didn't even know existed. The executives around him shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a woman in a navy blue suit, cleared her throat. "Sir, we should—" Alexander lifted a hand, silencing her. His focus stayed on Lena. For the first time in her life, Lena wasn't just some invisible girl from a struggling family. For the first time, she saw fear in the eyes of one of the most powerful men in the world, and she knew she had just uncovered something big. Alexander Reeves had faced tough negotiations, high-stakes mergers, and ruthless competitors. But nothing had ever rattled him like this. The girl standing in front of him, Lena Carter, was the exact replica of his daughter. The same sharp eyes, the same tilt of her chin, the same expression Olivia made when she was stubborn about something. It was impossible, and yet here she was, demanding answers in front of half his board members. He cleared his throat, regaining control of his thoughts. "Miss Carter," he said evenly, "this is neither the time nor the place for such claims." Lena's fist tightened. "I'm not making a claim. I'm telling you what I saw." The air around them felt heavy, charged with something unsaid. The executives exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension, but not daring to interrupt. Alexander turned to his assistant. "Reschedule my next meeting." "Sir?" she asked, surprised. "Now." His tone allowed no argument. The assistant nodded and quickly walked away, followed by the rest of the executives, who murmured amongst themselves as they disappeared. Down the hall, now it was just Alexander and Lena, standing in the middle of the gleaming corporate lobby, the weight of something huge pressing between them. "Come with me," Alexander finally said. Lena hesitated. A part of her had expected him to dismiss her, call security, maybe even laugh in her face, but instead, he was taking her seriously, which meant he knew something. She followed him to the private elevator, her heart pounding as the doors slid shut behind them. The silence stretched between them as they ascended to the top floor. Lena's mind raced, 1,000 questions fighting for space. When they reached his office, a massive space lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, Alexander gestured for her to sit. She refused. "Tell me the truth," she said. "How is this possible?" Alexander exhaled, walking toward his desk. He didn't sit either. Instead, he turned to face her, his sharp blue eyes unreadable. "Where's your mother?" he asked. Lena frowned. "What does that have to do with anything? Just answer the question." Lena crossed her arms. "She's at home. We live in Brooklyn." "Brooklyn," Alexander repeated, as if the word itself held meaning. His jaw tightened. Lena took a step forward. "Why does that matter?" Before he could respond, the office door swung open. Olivia Reeves stood in the doorway. Lena's breath hitched. Seeing a picture was one thing, but standing face to face with her was something else entirely. It was like looking into a mirror. Every detail was identical: their height, their features, even the way Olivia's eyebrows pulled together in confusion. "Dad," Olivia's voice was cautious. "What's going on?" Alexander turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Olivia, this is Lena Carter." Olivia's gaze flickered to Lena, her confusion deepening. "Why does she look like me?" Lena swallowed hard. "That's what I'm trying to find out." A long silence stretched between them. Olivia stepped closer, studying Lena like she was trying to make sense of something that made no sense at all. "This isn't possible," Olivia whispered. Lena's stomach twisted. "You think I don't know that?" Alexander rubbed his temples, as if trying to piece everything together in his mind. "There's only one explanation," he muttered. Lena's pulse quickened. "Then say it." Alexander's eyes met hers. And for the first time, there was no distance, no cold businessman mask, just raw, quiet shock. "You were never supposed to exist." The words landed like a blow. Lena felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. What do you mean?" Alexander ran a hand down his face. 8 years ago, I was engaged to someone my father had chosen for me, Victoria Hammond. But before that, I was in love with someone else. Lena barely breathed. Her name was Elena Carter. Lena's entire body went cold. My mom's name is Elena Carter. Alexander's expression shattered. It was the first time he looked afraid. I never knew, he whispered. She never told me. Lena shook her head. Anger and confusion swirling inside her like a storm. You're saying my mom was in love with you, and she just, what? Walked away. Olivia's voice was small. And never told you I had a sister. Alexander turned, pacing the room like a man trying to solve an impossible equation. No, it doesn't make sense. If Eleanor was pregnant, He stopped suddenly, eyes flashing. She must have left before I knew. Lena's throat tightened. So what? You just married someone else and forgot about her. His gaze snapped back to her. I never forgot about her. The words were sharp. Too sharp. Lena saw something flicker in his expression. Regret. She wasn't sure what hurt more. The fact that he might be telling the truth, or the fact that her mother had kept this from her for 17 years. I need to talk to her, Lena whispered, stepping back. I need to know why. Alexander nodded. And I need to know too. Lena turned, ready to leave. She had come here for answers. And now she had more questions than ever. But just as she reached the door, Olivia spoke. Wait, she said, her voice uncertain. Lena looked back. Olivia hesitated, then took a deep breath. No matter what happens, just don't disappear, okay? Lena stared at her. For the first time, she realized that Olivia looked just as lost as she felt. Lena swallowed hard and nodded. I won't. And then she walked out, knowing that nothing in her life would ever be the same again. Lena's hands trembled as she unlocked the door to their tiny Brooklyn apartment. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely think. She had spent the entire subway ride home, replaying the conversation with Alexander and Olivia over and over, trying to make sense of it. Her mother had lied to her. Elena Carter had spent 17 years keeping this secret, never once slipping, never once hinting at the truth. And now Lena knew. She stepped inside, her mother sitting at the kitchen table, a steaming cup of tea in front of her. Elena looked up, her face softening into a tired smile. You're home late, she said. Lena swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. I met Alexander Reeves today. The color drained from Elena's face. Her fingers clenched around her cup. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, thick with all the things left unsaid. Then Lena took a shaky breath. Mom, why? Elena closed her eyes, as if bracing for a wave she knew was coming. When she opened them again, there were tears. Because I was scared. Lena's throat tightened. Scared of what? Elena exhaled shakily. Of losing you. Tears burned at the edges of Lena's eyes. You lost me anyway. You kept me from my father, from my sister. Elena flinched. I never wanted to hurt you. Lena's voice cracked. Then why did you do it? For a moment, it seemed like her mother wouldn't answer. But then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she told the truth. When I found out I was pregnant, I went to tell Alexander. I was terrified, but I loved him. I thought we would figure it out together. Elena's voice wavered. But when I got there, he was with her, with Victoria. Lena's breath caught. Elena looked away, staring at the chipped edge of the table as if it held all her regrets. His father had arranged the engagement. It was a business deal, a merger between two powerful families. And Alexander, he didn't even fight it. Lena's stomach twisted. So you just left? Elena's eyes were glassy. I couldn't stay and watch the man I loved build a life with someone else. And I wasn't going to let my child grow up in a world where she would always come second. Lena shook her head, her voice thick. But I wasn't second. He didn't even know about me. Elena let out a broken laugh. Do you think his father would have let me stay if I had told him? If I had walked into that world and said, I'm pregnant with your son's child? She shook her head. They would have crushed me, Lena. Taken you away. I would have lost you forever. Lena's heart ached at the pain in her mother's voice, at the years of fear and sacrifice hidden behind her words. But it didn't change the fact that she had been robbed of a father, of a sister, of a life she never got to have. I deserve to know him, Lena whispered. Elena nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I know. Lena wiped at her face roughly. And Olivia. She deserves to know me. She deserves to have a sister. A quiet sob escaped Elena's lips. I know. Lena's voice softened, the anger slipping away. You were trying to protect me, Mom. I get that. But you don't have to anymore. Elena met her daughter's gaze, searching her face as if seeing her for the first time. And then, finally, she nodded. That weekend, for the first time in 17 years, Elena Carter stood face to face with Alexander Reeves. The air between them was thick with history, with all the words left unsaid. Alexander's eyes softened when he saw her. Eleanor, her breath hitched. It had been nearly 2 decades, and yet he still said her name like it meant something. I never knew, he said. His voice was raw, heavy with regret. If I had known, I know, she interrupted, but I couldn't risk it back then. He exhaled, shaking his head. I would have fought for you. I would have fought for both of you. Eleanor blinked away the tears that threatened to fall. And now, Alexander looked past her, his gaze landing on Lena and Olivia, who were standing a few feet away, staring at each other like they still couldn't believe the other was real. His eyes softened. Now I fight for all of us. Lena watched as her parents stood there, 2 people who had lost so much, who had been torn apart by circumstances beyond their control. But now they had a choice. She looked at Olivia, who gave her a small, uncertain smile. And for the first time, Lena smiled back, because despite everything, the lost years, the secrets, the pain, they had found each other, and that was what mattered most.